Welcome back to the Eyes on Israel Independence Day special, focusing on the War of Independence in 1947 and 1948. As always, Eyes on Israel is powered by Israel 365. Make sure to go to Israel365news.com for all the best news and analysis about Israel that you can trust. In the previous segment, we learned about the Jewish resistance and the lead up to the War of Independence. On November 29, 1947, the United Nations voted to partition the land of Israel into two states, an Arab state and a Jewish state. The Jews accepted the partition plan, and the Arabs, including all the Arab nations surrounding the nascent state of Israel, rejected the partition plan. And immediately after the UN vote at the end of November, local Arab militias began attacking the Jews in the land of Israel. Yaakov, where are we? What is the significance of this place?
The place we're standing in right now is called Castel, and it overlooks the road to Jerusalem. The local Arabs were led by a very intelligent and brilliant, charismatic leader called Abdel el-Qada el-Husseini. He was able to organize them in a way, they were basically peasants, but organize them in an effective way to attack the Jews. Primarily, his goal was to put the Jewish communities under siege, especially Jerusalem. The road from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem was blockaded by the villagers under his command, and it basically became impossible for the Jews of Jerusalem to have food and water and badly needed ammunition. In response, the leaders of the Jewish community, the Yeshuv as it's called, organized convoys to send supplies in armored vehicles up the road. By the way, keep in mind, during this period between November 47 and May 48, the British are still here, ostensibly in control. There's policemen, there's soldiers, they're supposed to maintain law and order. But in practice, they were turning a blind eye, at least to the Arab attacks on the Jews. So the Jewish communities are trying to supply through convoys to their different locations. As the months go by in the winter and spring of 1948, the situation is getting more and more desperate. The convoys are continually under attack. And at the end of March, 3 different convoys are attacked in 1 week. One in the Galilee, one on the way to Gush Etzion, south of Jerusalem, and one on the way up to Jerusalem. In 1 week is a disaster. The Arabs have attacked the convoys. Supplies are not getting through.
So that means that the Jewish community in Jerusalem, the over 100,000 Jews who lived there for all of these months, were under siege with limited food and water.
Absolutely correct. The risk of them having to surrender or be killed was very great. The larger strategic significance of that was not lost on the leadership. David Ben-Gurion was our leader at the time, not yet prime minister, because this is before the states declared, but he understood that if Jerusalem, God forbid, should fall, the morale of the Jews would fall as well, and the chance of holding on would be next to impossible. Towards the end of March, as I said, 48, the situation is dire, so terrible, that the American State Department, George Marshall was then Secretary of State, is advising the American President Truman to backtrack, to walk back the support for Zionism and for a Jewish state. And they're basically saying, we no longer support the partition plan. We no longer think that the Jews can have a state. And they're trying to come up with some other deal. Sounds a little bit familiar.
You know, it reminds us of what's going on today with America ostensibly supporting Israel, but also betraying us behind our back.
So the leadership, the Zionist Jewish leadership of the land of Israel has a choice to make under Ben-Gurion. And the choice is to move from defense to offense, or defense to offense, as you say in American English, to the best defense is offense, to stop being so small-minded and just protecting the communities unsuccessfully, that the only way we're going to win is if we go into the enemy territory and go on the attack. And a campaign is launched. It's called Operation Nachshon, named after Nachshon ben Aminadav, who was the first man to jump into the Red Sea back in biblical days. And that begins right here. This is the first attack. April the 3rd, 1948, just a few days after those convoys have been attacked, we go on the offensive and we succeed. This is not even a regular army. This is the underground movement called the Haganah, the main underground movement, succeeds in storming the village that we're in right here, this village which controls the road to Jerusalem, and managed to hold on. It's the first success, but not for long. Abd al-Qaeda al-Husseini organizes the villages all around to go on a counterattack. And there's waves upon waves of counterattacks over the next few days. But still, a small group of soldiers is holding on in here. And then occurs something which changes history. But no one knew it at the time. In the early hours of the morning, al-Husseini is walking around the area, and he is shot at and killed by guards up here, Jewish guards. They had no idea who he was. They just shot in the distance. Over the next few hours, when the news is that the commander has been killed, all the Arabs from all the villages come and converge on the Castel, on the soldiers that are up here, the Jewish soldiers that are up here, and they come in from every angle. It's wave upon wave, thousands of them. They have no chance of holding on. They're going to lose. And the order is given, we've got to retreat. We can't hold on to the hill anymore. And at that point, Shimon al-Fasi, on his own initiative, says the following statement, which becomes part
And
of...
who was he? Who was he?
One of the commanders, the Haganah commanders up here, on his own initiative, comes up with this idea which becomes part and parcel of our tradition. And he says, the officers will stay behind and provide covering fire, and the privates will retreat. So the officers, the leaders, stay in the front lines, fighting the Arabs that are coming up the hill, and the privates retreat. Unfortunately, all the officers that stay behind are killed by the Arabs when they come in. But this idea that leadership means leading from the front and not from behind is part and parcel of the ethos of the Israeli army, and perhaps one of the reasons why we succeed in our wars. Now, what happens is that the Arabs are also furious that their leader has been killed, and that's why they came in their huge numbers to take the Castel. But what happens next is crazy. They're lacking discipline, they're lacking leadership. They all go to the funeral, which is actually on the Temple Mount. He's buried on the Temple Mount, Husseini. And they all go to the funeral, and their reconnaissance says that the place is deserted, and we come back on the April the 10th with a small group to find the place deserted. We take over the village, we blow up all the houses, so there are none left except for the house behind us, which was the mayor's house, the Mukhtar's house, which we called as a strategic high ground. And from that day forward, the Castel's in our hands, and they do not succeed in taking it back. The road, for the time being, to Jerusalem is opened for supplies to come in successfully. The local Arabs are allowed a leader. We have a new ethos that the leadership stays behind to provide covering fire. And perhaps no less significant, this is the first time we succeed in taking territory from an enemy for 2,000 years. Since the days of the Maccabees, we have never won a war. Since the days of the Maccabees, we've never succeeded in winning.
Until that point.
Until this point, we've never won a war. The Jewish people have only been losing for 2,100 years, since the Romans got here, since Pompey took over the country in the 1st century BCE, till 1948, we've only been losing. Every time we tried to revolt, it was a disaster. For the first time now, it's a turning point in history. We start to go on the offensive, and we succeed. And we take territory. This is the first territory that we take from the enemy, and that we clear the Arabs out from, and it begins the process of the victory in the War of Independence. We don't know it at the time, because there's a lot of...
What you've just said is very powerful, and I think we all need to let that sink in, that the history of the Jewish people, as much as it's a story of survival, is also a story for most of that time of defeat, of degradation, of exile, and of suffering. And this place where we're standing in Castel on the road to Jerusalem, that's Jerusalem behind us, that's the highway to Jerusalem right behind us. This strategic location is the first victory for the people of Israel.
Correct.
Pretty much in our history,
Totally.
since before the Second Temple was destroyed.
100%.
That makes this, in my mind, a very sacred place.
Absolutely. It's both on the micro and the macro level. On the micro level of the War of Independence of those months, it was significant for opening the road to Jerusalem. It was significant for the first time we succeeded going on the offensive, that we can do it, that we're not going to lose, that we've got the ability to take the fight into the enemy territory and succeed, and to have the morale and the leadership to do it. But on the macro level, it's a change in Jewish history and ultimately world history. For the first time in 2 millennia, we are beginning to win. Because until now, we've only been losing. This is our first victory.
Well, Yaakov, that's a very powerful message of this place. You know, we're in a situation right now where Israel is in another existential war. We're in an existential battle with an enemy that wants to destroy us. And the whole question of winning and losing and the definition of winning and losing, of being able as a Jewish people to defend ourselves against our enemies is really something that's on the mind of all of us here in Israel ever since October 7th, especially. And that brings a special resonance and a reminder that so much of our history is losing and surviving, and we will survive. But the question of victory as part of our identity, and the question of victory as part of the plan of God for the return of Israel to our land, that question gets answered in this place, that yes, we can be victorious.
I would just add 2 points to that. One is victory involves taking territory. And the second thing is we also have miracles. And the fact that Husseini was killed was a miracle. And the fact that they didn't have the discipline to follow up and they abandoned the site was another miracle. The two go together.
Folks, Israel's War of Independence and all of Israel's wars ever since have been filled with miracles. They aren't really the story of our human might overcoming our enemies, but they're the story of what others view as fortunate circumstances or coincidences. But what you and I know are the hand of God. Because the guardian of Israel, as the Psalms say, neither slumbers nor sleeps. We'll be right back with more of the Independence Day special right after this. Please consider supporting the fighting men and women of the IDF with morale-boosting care packages, essential supplies that are in short supply, and the assurance that their sacrifice is honored and supported by a worldwide community of those committed to the values of freedom and security. This is your opportunity to stand shoulder to shoulder with Israel's defenders who are defending us all. Visit IsraelDefenders.com and click on the donate link to offer your support. Every contribution fortifies their resolve and ensures the safety and success of those who are safeguarding our shared ideals in these challenging times.